The back, hands up if you can hear me. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming along this evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all and thanks for joining us at Politics in the Pub this month for Save Tuvalu, Save the World. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Australia Institute, and I do want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and in particular to any Aboriginal people in the audience tonight or who indeed are joining us online on the live stream. Tonight, we'll be talking a lot about how climate change impacts First Nations people, and all around the country, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are really at the forefront of the climate crisis. Not only are the impacts affecting their communities, but often their communities are fighting the very fossil fuel projects that are fueling the climate crisis. And I think it's really important that we hold that in our minds tonight as we watch this amazing doco and have the discussion that we'll be having. The Australia Institute is always proud to be one of the most influential think tanks in the country. We are not government funded like many other think tanks. We do rely on philanthropy and donations, and if you are able to become a regular supporter of the Australia Institute or to chip in a few funds to help us do important work like our climate research, we would be very appreciative, and we appreciate all your support every month. You can head on over to australiainstitute.org.au to do that, or normally we've got a tap and go available at the back of the room where you can tap to make a donation. All donations to the Australia Institute Research Fund are tax deductible, and we really appreciate all the support from our supporters right across the country. I'm going to ignore my script this evening and introduce the speakers before we introduce the doco itself. So first of all, I would really like to welcome Gitty Yee, climate campaigner and Tuvalu resident. Please give a warm round of applause to Gitty. Gitty's an amazing communicator and visual storyteller. She's passionate about amplifying the voices of her community in the fight against climate change. She's been a communications officer at Toucan, Tuvalu's leading climate advocacy NGO, and really thrives on driving meaningful change and showcasing the resilience of her people and environment. We're delighted she can join us this evening. Please give her another round of applause. And Alopi Latukefu is Director of the Global Centre for Social Justice and Advocacy Leadership. Alopi leads initiatives to promote human rights, social justice and eco-justice through research and community education, and has developed and implemented advocacy leadership programs to drive positive change in the community. Please give him a warm welcome. And a few of you might recognise Stephen Long, Senior Fellow and Contributing Editor at the Australia Institute. Stephen worked as a senior reporter on the ABC's flagship investigative journalism program, Four Corners, and as economics correspondent and the national finance correspondent, filing across nearly all ABC outlets. And it was Stephen and Eleanor, if you can just give everyone a wave here in the corner, Eleanor, who really worked together to bring you this evening's documentary. So please welcome Stephen. And we're really excited to bring you this documentary this evening, Save Tuvalu, Save the World. I don't want to give too much away about what we're going to watch shortly, but in reality, what we're trying to do is put you this evening at the forefront of the climate crisis. I think you'll all be left with a lot of feelings after we watch this. And the main one that I normally think of or feel is anger. Because we all know that the climate crisis is real. We know the consequences are here with us right now. And we all know that not enough is being done about it. It's not that long ago since the Australian government approved the massive carbon bomb that is the North West Shelf project for another 50 years. And what we do here in Australia really has significant impacts, not just for us, but all around the world, and specifically for the Pacific, who are literally facing the worst impacts as we speak. And I really want to acknowledge both Stephen for his work on this, putting together this documentary, but also Eleanor Johnston-Leake that I mentioned earlier, who filmed and edited the documentary. And they were both really critical to making this project work. And I also really want to acknowledge Gitty and the other people like Gitty, because they are the ones who are out there on the front lines fighting the good fight on this. And we all know that as Australians, our country is really contributing to making the climate crisis worse, not better. And we saw the government God, was it this week or last week, do climate targets? Sometimes I get confused on when things happen. There's so much that's happening in the world at the moment. But we know that those climate targets, for example, aren't really based on what the science demands. But no matter how ambitious Australia's climate targets are, we're never going to meet those climate targets if the government keeps approving new fossil fuel projects. And they do it pretty regularly. So I think you'll be really fascinated by the documentary that we're about to see, and we'll come back together for a conversation after we show you this documentary, and then hopefully we'll have still some time for questions from the audience at the end. Hannah, if you can help us play the video.
Tuvalu is a tiny island country in the Pacific Ocean, located between Australia and Hawaii. It consists of 9 low-lying coral atolls and islands, covering just 26 square kilometers. We have a population of around 11,000 people. For us, climate change is not a future or a distant threat. It is something that is happening right now. We are in the forefront of this climate crisis.
These beautiful remote Pacific islands are ground zero for the global climate catastrophe. Within decades, Tuvalu could be wiped off the map.
On a scale from 1 to 10, the vulnerability of Tuvalu to climate change is 10.
Richard Gochran heads the Tuvalu Climate Action Network, known as TUCAN. He's fighting for his country's very survival.
It's getting more severe in terms of cyclones, in terms of the temperature, droughts that we are also been facing in here, and the sea level rise.
What is the future for Tuvalu if the world does not address climate change and if Australia does not phase out its fossil fuel production and export?
Yeah, that is one of the fearful aspects for the future of Tuvalu, where we are most likely going to be disappear. The nightmare for the people of Tuvalu of having their fate disappear from this earth.
How many years?
Within 50 years.
On current projections of rising sea levels, the average high tide will swamp much of the land by mid-century.
If we are not doing anything, sea level rises where it's gonna force us to be displaced from our own country. It's terrible. We're gonna lose our land, we're gonna lose our culture, we're gonna lose our identity if the world is not contributing to sustain the lives of the Tuvaluans.
In the evenings, Richard hosts a barbecue stand at his home in the capital, Funafuti. It's a meeting place for locals.
You know, at the end of the day, it's kind of sitting around together, having some talk, but more of a social place where we come around, sit around and have some cover.
Here we meet Kalisi Sogavalu. He's secretary of the Chamber of Commerce and a custodian of traditional ways of farming.
We've been taught by our elders how to plant this, a way to, to cultivate the soil and everything.
Now, climate change is spoiling the crops.
Do you worry?
Very much. I am worried.
In the daylight, Kalisi takes us up to the grounds where he grows a staple food, palaka or swamp taro.
Going up that way. All those are mine.
Rising sea levels are pushing water up from underground, causing salinity and drowning traditional crops.
Stephen, see the level of the water here? And this is not good. Because the water is a little bit salty and,
That's brackish water.
Yeah, brackish water.
Yeah. And so this is on the low tide. What's
And
the
this is on the low tide.
What's
Now
it-
it's already low. At the very lowest point now, it's about 12. And the level of the water is increasing every year.
What does this mean for the crops?
They are not healthy. We are starting to lose one of our main diet. I'm very emotional when I look at this. It's very bad, and it saddened me that the next generation will never see this kind of or taste this kind of food again, unless we can do something.
Food security, it's declining. We can no longer depend on our stable food as our food security. Now we are highly depending on imported food into the country. How much do we have to import? We almost import everything. Yeah.
In the afternoons, the airstrip next to the palaka pits becomes a makeshift playing field. Except when it's underwater. Rain is not the cause of this flood. Rising seas force water up through the earth.
Wow, look at this.
Yes, look at this.
So
The underground water.
this bubbles up from underground?
Yes, this is from the underground.
Samoya Tuti works for the Tuvalu Meteorological Service. She and her colleagues are preparing for a king tide still days away. But already, at high tide, a mass of salt water is seeping through the ground.
King tide, it's only once in a year. So it's going to be peak this Friday. So this is the largest high tide in the year. So 3.26 this Friday. But
So let's pray.
there is no strong wind at that time.
In 2023, the king tide coincided with high winds and extreme weather, causing chaos. Locals fear it will happen again.
What I worry most is to save my people.
This is the consequence of climate change.
Australia likes to present itself as part of the Pacific family, the big brother if you like. But that rhetoric evokes a lot of cynicism here in Tuvalu, given that Australia's fossil fuel exports are contributing to the climate change that could destroy this country.
How would you feel if a country that is meant to help, to protect, is the one slowly destroying you, little by little? We feel devastated, of course, because this is our home and this is the reality that we are facing.
Gitty Yee is part of an emerging generation of young climate leaders in the Pacific.
I see myself as a climate warrior. I fight for my country and I fight for what we believe in. I fight for our right to live, our right to prosper, for our future generations, for our parents, our elders, our ancestors who are buried here. Because I don't want my bones to be buried somewhere else. I want to be buried here. I want to live here because this is home. This is where I feel safe. This is everything to me.
Australia is offering Tuvaluans a path to migration under what's known as the Falapili Union.
It's about supporting the people of Tuvalu's to stay and thrive here on islands, or if they choose to live, work and study in Australia.
What the Honourable Penny was saying was that if a Tuvaluan chooses to migrate, but we could also use that if Australia chooses to stop fossil fuel, what about that?
The Australian government knows that nothing is more central to the security and well-being of the Pacific than climate change.
My message to Australia is that if Australia wants to be a good big brother, as they say they are, to the Pacific, they should really stop expanding and exporting fossil fuel. So Stephen, this is where they built the reclaimed land to protect the island from coastal erosion and even storm surges.
Gitty shows me one of the many efforts to combat climate change.
So they've literally sandbagged this area and lifted the coastline up higher to avoid the storm surges.
Yes, exactly.
So that protects this part of the island. But what about the other islands?
Exactly. What about the other islands? Of course, Tuvalu is taking all these adaptation measures, but that is just a band-aid for us. What we need to do is that we really need to stop the core cause of this problem.
Talofa, Marian. So nice to see you.
It's nice to see you, Stephen. How's it?
Marian Faliasiu works for Fusialofa, a disability organisation. I first met her when she came to Australia on a climate fellowship.
Colleagues, this is Lassie.
Talofa, Lassie.
People with disabilities are especially vulnerable to the impact of climate change.
How well understood is it that climate change has a really big impact on people with disabilities?
From my experience, it's not well known.
Marian's colleague Lassie is vision impaired. She nearly died in a cyclone that ravaged her island.
I think it's something that we need to focus on to make sure that persons with disability are not left behind.
It's D-Day for the King Tide. After it hits, large areas of the main island are inundated.
So there's water everywhere, and it is definitely salt water, but fortunately the winds have stayed moderate.
Sparing Tuvalu from the feared combination of extreme seas, fierce wind and heavy rain, at least for now.
The intensity of cyclones, it keeps on increasing. And when that will happen and coincide together, the vulnerability of us is at a very high level.
The day after the King Tide, we head out from the mainland to one of Tuvalu's other islands, Funafala, where they're fighting against the rising tides. I'm joined by Marian and Gitty and another young climate activist, Aselu O'Brien.
Talofa guys, welcome to Funafala. I've got families residing here in Funafala for quite some time, and I'll be showing you guys around.
Thank you, Aselu.
Aselu has been involved in efforts here to mitigate the impacts of climate change.
Youths used to come and plant these mangroves over the years.
You used to plant them?
Yes, I came one time with a bunch of groups of youth to plant these mangroves.
The mangroves help to fight coastal erosion, but few remain.
You can see these mangroves are surviving. This is the only mangroves that are surviving at the moment. And you know, along this area, mangroves have died off.
How many did you plant altogether?
More than 1,000.
Oh, so this is a tiny amount that's
Yes,
left.
this is the tiny amount that is left.
What do you think the mitigation efforts are worth?
Well, these mitigations are good, but then, you know, it's not enough.
Another project built with international aid seems more successful.
Come on in here, I'll show you a few plants that, crops that they grow in here. So yeah, we got cucumbers over here, got cabbage, and then we got some chilies over there.
I love chilies.
Yeah, also some papayas over there.
The wonderful garden grows crops in elevated tubs of clean soil, free from salinity caused by the rising seas. For this tiny island, it's a bounty, but these measures can't feed the whole nation, and they don't deal with the wider threat.
How do you feel when you hear that Australia is approving new coal mines and expanding gas production?
I feel really sad about that because, you know, we Tuvalu, we contributing less into the global emission, but we suffer the most. The feeling at the moment is I fear that the kids, the next generation of Tuvalu, they won't get to see the beauty of the island, feel the culture, the experience that what we have experienced when we were younger.
On Funafala, Gitty shares a poem she and Marion wrote about their country's fight for survival.
The ocean rises, relentless and cold, swallowing stories once fiercely told. Where the waves now claim the land, once stood villages built by hand. Palm trees whisper in the wind's embrace, ghosts of songs, of dances erased. Children play where ancestors prayed, yet now the tides wash it all away. Our voices fade in the ocean's roar. Our homes, our roots will be no more. The land we love, the life we knew, all lost beneath the sea's cruel blue. Who will remember us when we are gone? Who will sing our children's song? As we vanish, land by land, our world forgets we ever stand. We reach for hope, but it's swept away by the waves that steals our yesterday. We are fighting for our Maori, Te Roi, our Te Tapamoa. We are fighting for our health, peace and prosperity. Tuvalu, mo te atua. Tuvalu, with God.
Tuvalu is a litmus test for humanity. Will we sacrifice this small island nation and others like it on the altar of fossil fuels? Or will the world get serious about stopping rising temperatures and rising seas?
It's not only the fate of Tuvalu. If Tuvalu will disappear, that is also what is going to happen to others. No one will be spared.
Phase out fossil fuel and start saving Tuvalu, because if you save Tuvalu, you save the world.
If you want to save the world, you have to start with the little things. Save Tuvalu, save the world. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Stephen, and congratulations to you and Eleanor. But Gitty, I wonder if I can ask you first. You were obviously one of the key people as part of that documentary. Can you tell us a little bit about what daily life is like in Tuvalu and how much the climate crisis is kind of part of your everyday life now?
Daily life in Tuvalu, I would say, is just very calm, very peaceful. Daily life in Tuvalu is where you see how we learn our virtues, and that is to respecting our elders and respecting one another and just being there for each other. If you come to Tuvalu, soon as you step off the airport or get off the ship to the wharf, you will be greeted with alofa, which means love in our language. And when you leave with that alofa as well. Our people, it's all about unity. Help your neighbor, love your neighbor. And that's what we do. Even with every little thing that we have, like we would always support each other. And daily life in Tuvalu is just people just going on about their daily routine, which is mothers taking care of their children, children listening to their parents, taking care of their elders, fathers providing for the family. It's, for me, it's my very own little paradise. Even though it seems like we don't have much, but I believe that we have all that we need. We have our families, we have our friends, we have all the support that we need, because I think it's very important that we support each other, especially in these kind of times.
Thank you. Stephen, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit how this film came about.
Thanks, Ebony. I had wanted for years to go to Tuvalu and make a documentary because it is at the centre of the shocking realities of our time. And then I met Gitty and Marion and Aselu with some other young climate campaigners from Kiribati who were being hosted by Alopi over here on fellowships, learning to advocate for their communities in this climate crisis. And I went in to do some training with them. And I think you would understand after seeing the documentary, was very soon won over by their charm, their grace, just what wonderful people they were. And I learned from them, and in many ways. And I was struck by their stories about the here and now crisis. And I felt that there are many people in Australia and around the world who understand that Tuvalu is under threat, but kind of think, oh, if we don't do something in some decades hence, you could lose Tuvalu. And I was really touched and thought it was really important when I heard the stories about how the climate crisis was already impacting, that staple foods, traditional foods, were now being wrecked by salinity as the water didn't just inundate via the coast, but was forced up through vents in the ground, destroying these crops. And hearing about, you know, the difficulty of the efforts to try to mitigate and adapt, all those brave words, and hearing their stories about the impact, I just really wanted to go there and tell that story, and also give voice to them, to allow them to speak about their experience and the human dimensions of the climate crisis in the world's most vulnerable nation. And working for a great organisation that got that as well, I was able to.
Alopi, I'll come to you next. This story that we've just seen from Tuvalu is obviously not unique to Tuvalu. It's happening right across the Pacific. I mean, how does that make you feel watching not that, but thinking about those overall impacts?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a Pacifica Australian, someone who has been here for the majority of my life. I grew up actually in Papua New Guinea as a child, so I was a child of the Pacific. My father's Tongan, so very much identify with the Pacific. This crisis is one that is being felt across our whole region. And it is one that is substantial, and it is one that has been consistently identified by the leaders of the region as the most significant existential threat to the region over decades. Every year at the Pacific Island Forum that we have every year, 2 weeks ago now, the leaders make the same statement over and over again. It's time to stop talking, it's time for action, basically. And yet Australia continues to ignore. Thank you. That request, which is not a big one in many respects. It is a big one for our economic interests, but ultimately we are all of you, myself, every Australian is making a choice at the moment around whether or not this region, these peoples, continue to live the life that they've lived for thousands of years, or whether we just enjoy our lifestyles. And that's a huge sacrifice. And that's how I feel about it. But can I just say one more thing? This is not something that is just the Pacific alone. You have within your borders, within our borders, Australian citizens facing exactly the same crisis in the Torres Strait. And yet we are blind and we don't consider them, our own people, in this context. And I think that's a shame on us and a shame on our government. And it is something we need to grow up and start to make decisions to actually look after ourselves and look after our region.
Yes, and we've certainly, thank you, yeah. We've certainly seen, if anyone was able to read anything about the National Climate Assessment Report that was released just a few days ago, it's certainly outlined in very stark terms some of the impacts within Australia's borders that are here with us and expected if we don't stop dangerous climate change. But Gitty, do you think that the rest of the world, Australia and beyond, are really listening to Pacific voices on climate change? Do you feel like people are hearing the message that's coming from the Pacific?
I believe that Pacific people are very loud people, especially when it comes to, if you see the Pacific anywhere, you'll just hear someone speaking very loudly and you just know, oh, that's a Pacific person. But when it comes to fighting for something that they truly love, they will fight even louder. They will shout. And that is something that the Pacific is doing. And the Pacific is, you can start hearing our voices, even though we are like underrepresented in spaces that we're supposed to be present in, because these conversations that are being talked in all these spaces, it's discussing our future. And these are people discussing it for us. And we should be part of the people who are discussing it. We should be discussing it together because we are the people living that reality. And the Pacific, I think, will, even if I can't really say for sure, but the Pacific will not stop fighting for something that is right, especially something that we believe that we should maintain and really protect, and that is the future of the children. We always say that we inherit this land from our ancestors. Truth be told, we are just borrowing the future of our children. And most of the voices you are hearing now, it's our leaders and our young leaders. They are speaking up because this is their future that we're deciding, and this is their future. They will take over this future, and they don't want to take over a broken world. Thank you.
Stephen, we've touched on the Northwest Shelf project, but Australia in general, likes to stick to the letter of the law and the Paris Agreement and argue that, we're not responsible for emissions from the fossil fuels that we export. That's the country who buys our coal and gas. That's their problem. What do you make of that approach, and how much integrity does that approach have?
Clearly, that is a morally reprehensible and totally unacceptable approach, but it's actually also not legal according to the highest court in the world. The International Court of Justice recently gave out its opinion on a case brought by Vanuatu and other Pacific nations, and they specifically rejected the argument put by Australia and other fossil fuel producing nations that we're not responsible for our exports, we're only responsible for our so-called nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. And that there's actually, I could point you to some great work that University of New South Wales and Gillian Moon and colleagues there have done analysing that court judgment. And what the judgment makes clear is that all countries are responsible for protecting the climate system. And when we allow activities to happen within our borders that threaten the climate system, we are breaching international law and potentially liable. And they cited fossil fuel consumption, fossil fuel production, fossil fuel exploration and the granting of exploration licenses, and fossil fuel subsidies. Now, research the Australia Institute's done shows that we subsidise the fossil fuel industry to the tune of almost $15 billion a year. And we are the third largest exporter of liquefied natural gas and huge energy creating it, and create massive fossil fuels contributing domestically to our, sort of fossil fuel load. But we export multiples of what we produce in this country, and we are legally, according to the International Court of Justice, responsible for that, and we're certainly morally liable, and it has to stop. And politicians, as Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute is fond of saying, respond to pain or the threat of pain. Let's show them some pain. Let's cause some pain so that we stop this.
I just want to stick with you, Stephen, for a minute, because you've been writing a lot about that, juxtaposition of Australia's climate policies. And you're a long-term observer of how Australia does climate policy. Can you just talk us through, your observations, particularly over the recent few months?
Well, I've got this book idea, which is essentially that I do a kind of modern interpretation of Lewis Carroll, but about the way that we respond to the climate crisis, because it really feels like through the looking glass. And I was just struck by the absurd juxtaposition, Ebony, when on a Friday afternoon, in something known in political parlance as taking out the garbage, the government announced its formal approval of Woodside Energy's Northwest Shelf gas project, extending the burning of fossil fuels for another 40 years beyond its life when it was due to end, out to 2070, and a massive carbon bomb, billions of tonnes of emissions. So that's on a Friday towards the close of business. On the Monday morning, they released the report about the National Climate Risk Assessment, showing that on our current trajectory, we're headed for an almost unimaginable catastrophe where millions of people face coastal inundation, where property prices collapse, whole sections of the country become uninsurable. We see hundreds of percentage point rises in the number of people who die from extreme heat. And you release that on the Monday morning after you've just announced this massive carbon bomb getting approval. It's like, how do you have such an absurd juxtaposition and reconcile that?
unless you have stepped through the looking glass and logic is backwards. It's just crazy, crazy stuff. And yeah, I mean, I reckon that I've got to work on that, because I reckon I've got a bestseller there.
Alopi, Australia, what Stephen has just described is obviously how Australia has been behaving for many, many years now. But it's also, this government has made a point that it does take climate change seriously. It's tried to say it's different from previous governments, yet we're seeing them make similar approvals of fossil fuel projects at the same time as the government is kind of reaching out to the Pacific, not only to create new security relationships, but to ask Pacific countries for their partnership in perhaps hosting a climate conference, a UN climate COP here in Australia. How much is the climate crisis and Australia's response to it having on the nature of Australia's relationship with the Pacific?
As I mentioned before, the Pacific has consistently said this is the greatest existential threat the region faces. Beyond, and you have to remember, this is a region that has gone through colonialism, that has gone through 2 world wars, massive conflict. Kiribati and Tuvalu alone, the theatres of some of our great World War II conflicts. And yet, for the region, they are saying nothing compares to this impact. For the Australian government to not understand that it takes 2 to tango. If you aren't taking our the Pacific's existential threat seriously, then perhaps the Pacific won't take your existential threat seriously. And we all know what that existential threat is. And you only have to see in the last 3 weeks the failure of the government diplomatically to secure the necessary agreements with 2 of the major countries in the region, Vanuatu and Papua New Guinea, on agreements around relationship, but also around defense and security. This is a message. And the Pacific, and this is again something I would say to all of you, we need to understand the Pacific much better than we do. And one of those areas is understanding when the Pacific says something to us, they are always polite. It is actually really impolite to say, you're doing the wrong thing. It's impolite to say no. But actually, when they say yes, if you don't understand the Pacific, they're actually saying no. And that's something which we need to better understand. We need to be better at understanding the relational approach to the region that's so important to our own security, our own futures. If we can get that better in place, if we can demonstrate to the Pacific we take this existential threat seriously, then we will get the response that we're looking for from them. But until that point, no.
Makes sense. If I can just ask people, I've got another question for Gitty and for Stephen, and then we'll have time for a couple of questions from the audience. We've got the microphone down the front here. If you've got questions, if you want to start making your way forward now, we'll try and get to a couple of those before we finish up. Gitty, obviously, watching that film, you are contending with a lot as a climate change warrior who's kind of trying to fight for your community. You're really up against it, but it's so clear the love that you have for your country and your community and the passion that you have for this. So I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what gives you hope when you're out there fighting against the climate crisis.
What gives me hope is that our young people are awake, that they, especially those who stand for justice, people, they know what's happening, they see it, like it's right there in front of them. And what gives me hope is how all these young leaders I've met along the way, how they stand for climate justice, how they stand for environmental justice, how they stand for human rights. It gives me hope to see that the world is actually acting, like they are actually doing something. And it gives me hope. This gives me hope because this is a shared crisis and this needs shared collection, and we all need to work together to protect our world because this is the only world we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, we'll go to questions from the audience just shortly, but I know you did an event yesterday in Sydney, and you've got another one with Gitty, I think, later this week. What is it that you hope people can take away from this film?
I think what the message I get out of this film in some ways is that the climate crisis, the environmental crisis, and social justice and human rights are all intertwined. And if we believe in social justice, then we have to be on the side of the Pacific, and the world has to act. We can't allow a tragedy of the commons where everyone looks to reap their short-term gain out of the situation and no one takes care of the whole. We just can't allow that. And we have to stand in solidarity with these people. And I just want to have their voices heard, and I'm hoping to inspire people to action, not sorrow. And I do feel sorrow. I look at, I made that documentary, and every time I see it, I have a different reaction to it. And often it is one of profound sadness. But I don't want that to be the lingering emotion. I want it to be a call to arms, a call to action, that we need to be in solidarity with these people. If we have any morality, we need to stand up for the Pacific and fight for them and with them.
Thank you very much. I believe we've got a question down here.
Yes, thank you. And Kitty and Stephen, thank you very much for the efforts that have gone in to make this video. It's a quite powerful message. And there wouldn't be a person in this room tonight that hasn't been impacted even more than we have been in the past. And we do hear your call to arms. But we are a room of only about 100 people, I guess, like-minded people, I add. What efforts have you made to get this on national television, for example? You've got contacts at Four Corners and other ABC shows like 7:30 and the like, and the other channels, social media, etc. How do you propose to get this message out to hundreds of thousands of people rather than just a small group of us?
I wish I did have control over the ABC's output. One reason I decided to come to the Australia Institute was I kind of felt like sometimes the ABC got tripped up on procedure and put more emphasis on the appearance of impartiality than actually telling the truth. It's a work in progress. I mean, I would love this to go to a huge audience, a bigger audience than it currently has, but we're building this. We've actually had huge impact from some of the video work we have done over the past couple of years. If you look at the cumulative impact, I did something about the sham of selling carbon credits from a proposed national park, and crisis with, it's another story that I worked on with a former colleague who's here in the room. And we had French television approach me. We had television from Asia. The cumulative audience that our little doco generated ended up being in the millions of people. And so we are making a difference with what we do. Still working on the grand plan and the grand ambitions of how we go completely bloody Hollywood on this. But, you know, watch this space.
Can I actually just respond also to the point you make? So many of you here are like-minded, as you say, are people who are in the progressive side, probably in politics, people who want to make a difference on climate change. We, in some ways, need to challenge ourselves to speak to those who are not necessarily in that space. And that is often very hard because we like to speak to those who agree with us. And that is really the challenge of advocacy, is that when we brought our fellows out for the program that we took them up to Newcastle to speak to communities there who were impacted from the changes, not by climate change, but to the coal industry. And that was part of the conversation and part of the necessary coming together of conversations that have to happen if this is going to actually move.
So tomorrow, Gitty and I are going to be at the Victorian Trades Hall Council speaking to union officers. And I think that those things are important. If you believe in social justice, I don't see that I think we need to have connections between disparate groups, between the labour movement and climate activists, and we need to find points of coalescence. And so I think that those meetings are important, and so is getting to people who completely disagree with you. But we shouldn't also underestimate the value of like-minded people coming together, because how do we maintain our courage and hope other than supporting one another in this?
And I would also just add, this will go up on the Australia Institute's YouTube channel, where it is free to share to social media, to send via email to, you know, friends and family, perhaps those, I don't know about your family, but there's certainly some people who don't have my politics in mind.
We all have that family.
You know, we can all play a role in getting this message out beyond, you know, the tens of thousands of people who support the Australia Institute. But as Stephen says, the more we share it, the more it gets out beyond and accumulates those views. So thank you for that question. Next question.
Hi, thank you so much for putting on this panel and for speaking to us all today. I'm a local climate activist here in Canberra and a PhD student at the ANU. And I wanted to ask, probably reinstating and re-engaging with that question around listening. Obviously, the Australian government has put this huge emphasis on listening to its Pacific family, and it's a huge part of its discursive diplomacy. And so I was wondering what your opinions on that were, particularly as we, you know, potentially have this COP31 coming to Australia. Do you think Australia is actually listening, and whether you think it is or isn't? Obviously, there's been this effort at consultation. Is it more than consultation, or, you know, what is real listening to you?
Maybe I can answer that in two things. One, I think Australia does have to make an effort to double down its listening because listening is often followed by telling in the way in which we do. And part of that is because we have a very transactional approach to the way in which we engage. The Pacific has always worked on a relational basis. And that is something that to get to an agreed position, everyone has to listen to each other respectfully. You may disagree, but at least you listen. That sometimes isn't always the case in the way in which we transact our relationships with the region. And that's something we need to learn, because the region's been a lot longer than Australia and as a modern context has been. So we need to understand that. The second point on COP31, if we are lucky enough to get it, it is a significant opportunity for the world to be exposed to what the reality of climate change is in countries like Tuvalu. It is very theoretical for most in the world, particularly those in Europe, in Australia, and many of the other continental countries. The understanding of what the impact of this is something which only when you feel, you touch, you talk, you engage with communities like those in Tuvalu, in Tonga, in other parts of the Pacific, you get that you actually start to understand why this is important, but also start to understand why it's important also for you and your families. And that's something that I feel if COP31 does come to the Pacific, because it's been hosted by the Pacific, but hasn't come to the Pacific. If it comes here, there is a great opportunity to have those conversations and to get that experience to many people who otherwise haven't been exposed to it.
Gitty, is there anything you would like to add about what real listening looks like?
Well, I was just thinking about the Pacific Islands Forum, and especially majority of the Pacific people know this because during Australian Prime Minister's press conference, the Pacific media wasn't allowed to be involved in his press conference. They were told, sorry, Australian media only. And he talks about the Pacific and Australia as family. You don't treat your family like that. So, yeah.
I know who that reminds me of, that kind of approach. I know we're all thinking it. Do we have one more question?
Hello. So when the Falapella Union was announced, it was major news across the region. A lobby mentioned how Pacific countries have started to turn down similar agreements with Australia. Do you think that countries such as Tuvalu would ever leave existing agreements like the Falapella Union with Australia due to the lack of climate action?
Maybe I can respond, but perhaps Gitty, who's from Tuvalu, can actually talk to that. Unfortunately, for many in these very exposed countries, these low-lying small island states, atoll states like Tuvalu, like Kiribati, like Marshall Islands, like FSM, there isn't a choice. The reality is that they will have to move much of the population in future years if the trajectories, if the science is as correct as it says it is. This is another part of the conversation I think that has to be had around the architecture of the international system to accommodate climate mobility. We do not have protection of people displaced by the climate at the moment, but that's perhaps another conversation. For the context of what you've asked, whether Tuvalu would leave, I think Tuvalu, along with the rest of the Pacific, sees Australia as part of the Pacific. And that's the difference. And, you know, many of you, if you travel to the Pacific, you know, a small case in point, and we had this the other night with Gitty, it is very easy for all of us to travel to the Pacific. We get to there. For Pacific Islanders to come to Australia, it's actually very difficult. And that is, for me, outrageous, because we are part of this region. We are family. We are part of what makes this region work. We are part of who we need to, you know, we need to stand up as a country and say, as part of this region, perhaps we need to rethink a range of things. But whether or not they would pull out, I don't think they would, because, you know, they see that the relationship with Australia is a very important one. But perhaps, Gitty, you can talk to that.
Well, I am but one person, so our people may have different mindsets, and so I speak on what I feel and think. For me, the fallibility is it's an opportunity for the people, and there are people who will obviously like want to leave, and there are people who would want to remain in Tuvalu. But with this choice that was given to us, it was never meant to be a choice that was supposed to be given to people in the first place. What I mean by this is that if there was like no coal mining or all of this gas emission, fossil fuels, no one would ever have that choice to move. That would never have been a choice given to anyone. And if we are starting to move out of our country, that will eventually happen to the rest of the world. Everyone will keep moving and moving and moving until there's no more land to move to. And I think it's scary because we are not safe anywhere we go. We are not safe where we are. We're not safe where we're going to be located. And if our people decide to move, it's a different space. It's different culture. They have to adapt. They have to learn about like the new place that they will be going to. And that is something really hard because as time goes on, we will start to forget who we are. Even though we say, yes, we will bring our culture. We do. We want to keep bringing our culture. But then our population is just 11,000 people. It will continue to the point that there's no more full blood Tuvaluan. It will be like a half blood until there's no more. We have no more land, no more us, no more existence. And that's a scary thought. And no one should ever have that feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. We might have to wrap it up there. Before we wrap up, I did just want to pick up on a point that Stephen raised before about what we can do and what politicians respond to, which is pain. And I just wanted to remind everyone, because it can be a little bit bleak to talk about the impacts of climate change, that the Australian people have elected a climate supermajority at 2 elections in a row now. And Labor has a huge majority in the lower house. And together with the Greens, it has a majority in the Senate. And I just want to remind everyone that when Julia Gillard was in minority government and she didn't have a majority, Prime Minister Julia Gillard was able to negotiate a huge climate change package that included investment in clean energy. It included a price on carbon that brought in revenue while the economy and jobs both grew. And she was able to do that in a minority government. And there is absolutely nothing standing in the way of the Albanese government in this term of parliament stopping the expansion of fossil fuels. The only thing in the way of the Albanese government doing that is Labor itself. So there's a lot that they can do in this term of parliament. The Australian people have certainly given them the imprimatur to do so. And we just have to hold them to that possibility. And we've got to raise Labor's ambitions. I just want to leave you with that thought. We can do it. And the Australian people have certainly spoken and they want climate action. Thank you so much for coming along this evening. Can I get another round of applause for all our speakers, Gitty, Olopi and Stephen? Thank you so much all for coming out to Verity Lane Market tonight. We love Verity Lane. We love that they host us every month. And if I might just recommend, if you haven't eaten anything downstairs, I had the lemongrass chicken rice paper rolls from downstairs and they were incredible. I'm going downstairs to have them now. But thank you so much for coming along this evening. Next month, I think our Politics in the Pub is going to be, I think, on housing. Is that right, Hannah? Yes, on housing. So come along next week and join us for Politics in the Pub again. Thank you again for coming out this evening, and we look forward to all seeing you next month. And don't forget to check out the Australia Institute's website, where you can find not only this short film, but also all of our podcasts and research, explainers, and all the other fantastic research that we put out to help people put the climate crisis into context, but also how we can tackle it. Thanks again, everyone. See you next month.